Welcome to another episode of People O Pod. To start things off today, I want you to imagine a jarring, almost impossible contradiction. Just picture an artist who released a single album that sold over 33 million copies worldwide.
That is just a staggering number to even wrap your head around.
Right, and this wasn't just, your standard pop record. It was this massive cultural earthquake defined by raw, unfiltered, explicit anger. The kind of angst that practically scorches the earth and leaves a crater behind. Got that image in your head?
I do. It's a very specific, fiercely intense kind of energy to hold on to.
Exactly. Now, I want you to take that exact same artist and rewind the clock just a few years. Imagine her being dubbed the Debbie Gibson of Canada.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Picture the big hair, the neon windbreakers, performing incredibly safe, synthesized dance pop, and wait for it touring as the opening act for Vanilla Ice.
The contrast is completely wild when you put it side by side like that. If you didn't know better, you would swear you were looking at two completely different human beings operating in entirely different universes.
You really would. But of course, we're talking about the exact same person. Today, we are taking a deep dive into the life, the unseen struggles, and the massive cultural footprint of Alanis Morissette.
It's such a fascinating journey to unpack.
It totally is. We have a great stack of sources in front of us today, everything from archival chart histories and music industry biographies to recent, deeply revealing documentaries like Finding Your Roots and Jagged.
And looking at all these sources together really changes the narrative we thought we knew.
It totally does. The mission of this deep dive is to look past her crown as the queen of alt-rock angst, though she absolutely earned that title, and understand the actual mechanics of her transformation.
Right.
We are looking at a phenomenon who single-handedly shifted the entire music industry in the 1990s. And the reason the story matters so deeply to you as you listen today is that her journey is the ultimate real-time blueprint of what happens when a person simply stops playing the character that society manufactured for them.
Yeah.
And finally voices the devastation they were always told to suppress.
That is the perfect foundation for this exploration. Because to truly understand the magnitude of that pivot, to understand how she got to that earth-scorching anger, we have to look at the soil she grew out of.
Okay, set the scene for us.
Well, she was born in Ottawa, Ontario in 1974. And she was raised with a very devout Catholic upbringing. But the sources reveal something incredibly profound about her family dynamic.
Oh, right, the documentary Revelation.
Exactly. On a 2024 episode of the documentary series Finding Your Roots, she discovered that she actually had hidden Jewish ancestry on her mother's side.
Wow. And this wasn't just like a minor genealogical footnote, right? This was a major suppressed family trauma.
Precisely. Her grandparents had fled Hungary during the anti-Soviet uprising in 1956. They had been Holocaust survivors who were so traumatized by systemic persecution that they completely buried their Jewish identity to assimilate and survive.
Wait, they just buried it completely?
Completely. Her parents simply never told the children. Alanis didn't find out until she was in her late 20s.
That is just staggering to think about. Growing up inside this entirely hidden history, surrounded by a suppressed family narrative of fleeing trauma and hiding your true self just to survive.
Yeah, it's heavy.
You have to imagine that kind of unspoken tension trickles down through a family. And it's fascinating because her early career was also heavily built on suppressing her true voice to play a very specific, polished role.
It really was. By the time she was in junior high, she was already a working child actor on the sketch comedy show. You can't do that on television.
Oh, wow. I remember that show.
Right. And from there, she pivots right into the music machine. In 1991 and 1992, she releases 2 dance pop albums in Canada, Alanis and Now Is the Time.
I always try to visualize the mechanics of the music industry in this era. It wasn't about finding a unique artist. It was like a factory assembly line.
Literally an assembly line.
The label figures out that teenage dance pop is selling, so they find a talented kid, put them on the conveyor belt, hand them the synth tracks, and manufacture a highly specific, very profitable product. You don't ask the spark plug on an assembly line to suddenly have its own feed layer.
You just wanted to do its job. And that is exactly how the Canadian label, MCA Canada, viewed her. She was a very successful product for them.
Right.
That first album went platinum in Canada. She won Juno Awards, which are the Canadian equivalent of the Grammys. She was getting top 40 hits. She was deeply embedded inside that traditional pop machine.
But something starts to fracture during that second album. I've always wondered about this because from the outside, she has everything a young artist is supposed to want. Fame, money, awards.
Yeah, the dream.
Exactly. What actually caused her to step off that highly profitable assembly line? Did she just wake up one day and rip up her contract in rebellion?
That is the popular myth, but the reality is much harsher. She didn't step off the assembly line. The factory managers actually threw her off.
Wait, really?
Yeah. When she started recording her second album, she wanted to introduce more thoughtful lyrics and pull back on the glitzy, synthetic production as she was growing up. But to the label, that deviation from the formula was a commercial failure.
Because it didn't sound like the first record?
Exactly. The second album sold about half of what her debut did, so MCA Canada literally dropped her.
Wow.
They told her, in no uncertain terms, that her musical identity was shifting in a direction they simply weren't interested in developing. They wanted the Canadian Debbie Gibson. They didn't want the real Alanis.
That is wild. So it wasn't this calculated, empowering rebellion right out of the gate. It was a rejection. The industry looked at her authentic self and said, no, thank you. This isn't marketable.
Exactly. And that rejection is the critical catalyst for everything that follows. It forces a complete geographical and creative shift. She moves from Ottawa to Toronto, tries writing with different people, and eventually packs up and heads to Los Angeles.
And this is where the alchemy of her career truly happens, right?
Yes. In L.A., she meets a producer and songwriter named Glenn Ballard.
And I want to pause here because the dynamic between a young 20-something female artist and an older, established male producer in the music industry is usually, well, a very dark story about control and manipulation.
Oh, absolutely.
The producer usually acts as the new factory manager, but looking at the accounts of their studio sessions, that is not what happened at all.
Not even close. The way they worked together was radically different from anything she had experienced. The mechanism of their collaboration was entirely based on flow and safety.
Which is so rare.
It is. Ballard didn't bring in a board of executives. He didn't hand her pre-written pop tracks. It was just the two of them in his studio. They would write and record a song in a single day.
Wow, a single day.
Yeah. He explicitly supported her newfound raw sound rather than trying to mold it to his own tastes or current radio trends.
So he just gave her the microphone and got out of the way.
He gave her a safe container to experience the freeness of her own creative spirit. And a crucial technical detail here. Many of the vocals you hear on the final album are actually the single-take demo vocals from those writing sessions.
Wait, really? The final tracks are just the demos?
Yes. He didn't make her go back into a vocal booth and do 80 takes to make it sound pitch perfect and polished. He captured the pure emotion in the room and kept it.
Which is why her voice cracks and wails and feels so incredibly urgent. It's not a performance, it's a real-time exorcism. But even with this incredible music in hand, the industry still didn't understand it, did they?
They were terrified of it. According to her management at the time, every single major label they approached in Los Angeles rejected this new music. Every single one.
That is insane to think about now.
Right. They didn't know how to market a woman who was this angry and this articulate. It wasn't until Maverick Records, a label founded by Madonna, finally heard it, that someone took a chance and signed her.
Thank goodness Maverick had the vision, because the music they recorded in that little studio became Jagged Little Pill.
Yep.
Maverick releases it internationally in June 1995. And from what I read, the label's initial expectation was incredibly modest. They were just hoping to sell a couple 100,000 copies, enough to justify letting her make a second record.
Which is so funny in hindsight.
Right. But then an influential modern rock radio station in LA called KROQ started spinning the lead single, You Oughta Know.
And that single fundamentally altered the cultural landscape. Musically, it was a gut punch. You have Flea and Dave Navarro from the Red Hot Chili Peppers playing on the track, giving it this incredibly raw, driving, heavy, alternative rock edge.
Yeah, that bass line is iconic.
It really is. And layered right over that aggressive instrumentation is her scathing, explicit, entirely uncompromised vocal delivery. It was a sound and a fury that mainstream radio simply was not used to hearing from a young woman.
Which brings up something that has always bothered me about the cultural legacy of that specific song. We talk about the fury, the instrumentation, the absolute genius of the lyrics. And yet, for almost 3 decades, society has been utterly obsessed with the cultural rumor that You Oughta Know is about Dave Coulier.
Oh, Uncle Joey from Full House.
Yes. The actor she dated briefly in the early 90s. Why do we do this? Why does society obsess over who a woman's song is about, rather than listening to what the song is actually saying?
It's a fascinating sociological defense mechanism.
Hmm.
When a woman expresses genuine righteous rage, it makes a patriarchal society very uncomfortable.
Right.
So, to diminish the art and make it digestible, society reduces that profound rage to petty celebrity gossip.
Mm.
If it's just a funny anecdote about a sitcom star, we don't have to reckon with the actual pain in her voice.
It totally neutralizes the power of the song.
Exactly. But Alanis herself has always provided a brilliantly nuanced response to this. She has noted the dark irony of multiple different men publicly trying to take credit for a song where she is singing about someone being a complete monster.
That is such a good point. Why would you want to be the guy in that song?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But more importantly, she explained the mechanism behind the lyrics. She wrote the song out of pure devastation. She was tapping into a profound well of anger, betrayal, and sadness that women are routinely, systematically told to swallow. It was never about a specific actor. It was a universal scream against being discarded.
And the world screamed back with her.
Let's talk about the sheer scale of what happened next, because I don't think people fully grasp how big Jagged Little Pill became. Just how massive was this explosion?
It was unprecedented. The album sold 33 million copies worldwide. For context, for a female artist, that is second only to Shania Twain's Come On Over.
That is just wild.
It won 5 Grammys, including Album of the Year, making her the youngest winner in that category at the time. But its true legacy is that it kicked the door wide open for a massive wave of female artists who didn't fit the smiling pop princess mold.
Without the commercial proof of Jagged Little Pill, record executives likely would never have greenlit the mainstream pushes for artists like Fiona Apple, Shakira, Avril Lavigne, or Pink.
It proved that female angst wasn't some niche underground market. It was actually the biggest, most profitable demographic in the world. But of course, the moment you become the biggest artist on the planet, the culture turns on you with hyper scrutiny. We have to talk about the backlash to the song Ironic.
Oh, the infamous grammar debate.
Yes, it was the 4th single from the album, and it ends up becoming her absolute biggest hit. And yet it received this heavy, almost relentless criticism for what critics called its lyrical malapropisms.
And for those who might not be familiar with the term, a malapropism is when you use an incorrect word that sounds similar to the right one, or when you fundamentally misunderstand the definition of the word you're using.
Right. People loved pointing out that rain on your wedding day or traffic jam when you're already late isn't actually ironic. It's just deeply unfortunate.
Critics spent years debating the dictionary definition of situational irony, like a fire station burning down, versus literary or verbal irony, which is closer to sarcasm. They argued that her lyrics just listed a series of bummers, not true ironies.
It is so wildly pedantic. You have tens of thousands of people collectively losing their minds, singing along to this song in massive arenas.
Absolutely.
The music video, where she plays 4 different brilliant versions of herself trapped in a car, wins 3 MTV Video Music Awards. It's capturing a very specific feeling of cosmic frustration. And yet you have these critics sitting there adjusting their glasses saying, well, actually, getting a free ride when you've already paid does not strictly adhere to the Oxford definition of irony.
It completely misses the emotional truth of the song for the sake of grammar.
It really does. But it highlights how deeply the culture felt entitled to dissect every single thing she did. And enduring that level of fame, that level of constant analysis, takes a massive physical and psychological toll.
Oh, without a doubt.
The immediate aftermath of Jagged Little Pill was an 18-month world tour. Think about the physical exhaustion of that mechanism. She was playing arenas every night. Radiohead was opening for her. Taylor Hawkins, who later joined the Foo Fighters, was her drummer.
It was a relentless, multi-million-dollar machine, and she was the engine keeping it all running.
I always think of sudden, massive fame like scuba diving. When you are thrust into the deepest, highest pressure environment imaginable, you can't just casually swim back to the surface when it's over.
That's a great way to put it.
If you ascend too fast, you get the bends. You have to stop and decompress, or the pressure will literally kill you. And that is exactly what she realized she needed to do. After the final show in December 1996, she didn't rush back to the studio to capitalize on the momentum.
No, she stepped out of the pressure cooker completely. She went to India for 6 weeks with her mother, her aunts, and some friends.
Wow, just completely unplugged.
And that period of decompression was profound. During that trip, she started heavily practicing Iyengar yoga, which is a very specific discipline. Unlike flowing, fast-paced yoga, Iyengar focuses heavily on precise physical alignment, often using props, and forcing you to hold postures for long periods of time.
So it's incredibly grounded.
Yes, it forces deep, uncomfortable physical and mental stillness. It was the exact opposite of jumping around on a stadium stage. She was seeking balance. She had to figure out how to exist as a human being again, not just as a global commodity of angst.
And that stillness completely informed her highly anticipated follow-up album in 1998, Supposed Former Infatuation Junkie. Commercially, it was a monster out of the gate. It debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200 and broke the record for the highest first-week sales by a female artist, moving nearly 500,000 copies in a few days.
But creatively, it alienated a lot of the fans who just wanted more screaming.
Right, it wasn't Jagged Little Pill Part 2.
Exactly. She intentionally subverted the expectations the industry placed on her. The lyrics on this album were incredibly wordy, deeply philosophical, and much more experimental in their structure. She wasn't just giving them angry anthems anymore.
And then you have the lead single, Thank You, which was directly inspired by her time in India. The music video for that song generated some controversy because she appeared completely nude, standing on busy city streets and inside grocery stores while people walked past her.
But it's vital to note, it was not shot in a sexualized way.
Not at all. The nudity in the Thank You video was incredibly symbolic of her psychological state. It was a visual representation of stripping away the armor.
Yeah.
It was about shedding the massive, suffocating expectations that the world had placed on her. She was standing there entirely exposed, entirely vulnerable, expressing gratitude rather than rage. It was a profound artistic statement about reclaiming her own body and her own narrative.
And talking about her body and her narrative brings us to a part of this story that requires some real care. Because while we've been talking about her public evolution and these massive artistic triumphs, the sources we're looking at reveal some deeply painful, unseen scars operating behind the scenes throughout this entire timeline.
Yes, the narrative of the empowered, untouchable rock star often masks a much more vulnerable reality. Throughout her teens and 20s, the exact time she was experiencing the stratospheric fame, she was actively battling severe depression and life-threatening eating disorders.
She was buckling under the weight of the scrutiny.
Later in life, she dealt with debilitating postpartum depression, which she spoke about very candidly on CBS This Morning in 2019. And she did that specifically to erase the stigma, again, using her voice to reveal what women are told to hide.
It's a pattern of having to constantly fight for her own boundaries.
Exactly, and those boundaries were violated in other ways, too. She endured a massive betrayal of trust when her business manager, Jonathan Schwartz, systematically stole over $5 million from her over a period of 7 years.
Oh, that's just awful.
He was a trusted figure who was gaslighting her about her own finances while she was trying to focus on her healing. So you have a person who is constantly having her boundaries violated, her trust broken, and her body scrutinized. But there is one bombshell revelation from the sources that truly contextualizes everything we've been talking about.
Right.
In 2021, a documentary called Jagged was released, and in it, Alanis revealed that men had committed statutory rape against her when she was just 15 years old.
And we should note clearly that she ultimately denounced the documentary itself, stating it contained implications and facts that were not true, and she chose not to attend the premiere.
Right, that's very important to note.
But she did put that specific, horrifying truth out there. She was 15. That is right around the time she was recording those early dance pop albums in Canada.
The same era when the music industry was treating her like a product on an assembly line, older men in positions of power were exploiting her in the most horrific way imaginable. How does that revelation change our understanding of her music?
It fundamentally reevaluates her entire legacy. Knowing what she endured as a 15-year-old completely recontextualizes the devastating anger of Jagged Little Pill.
Yeah.
When you listen to those vocals cracking with fury on You Are or Right Through You, you realize that this rage wasn't just a catchy alt-rock aesthetic curated for MTV. It wasn't just about a bad breakup.
It was the sound of a survivor.
Exactly. It was a young woman who had experienced deep, systemic exploitation by older men, finally finding her voice, finding a safe studio space with Glenn Ballard, and demanding to be heard. It elevates the music from mere teenage angst to a profound, monumental reclaiming of personal agency.
It is chilling when you view it through that lens. It changes every single note of that album, and it makes her survival and her eventual pivot to healing all the more triumphant.
Which brings us to the modern era of Alanis Morissette.
She didn't just survive the trauma and the fame. She expanded her life in every possible direction.
I mean, in 1999, she literally played God in Kevin Smith's comedy film Dogma, which, considering everything we've discussed about her omnipresence in the 90s, was a brilliant self-aware casting choice.
Absolutely. And then in 2018, Jagged Little Pill is adapted into a Broadway jukebox musical. But instead of just being a nostalgic cash grab, the musical tackles heavy, complex themes like addiction, trauma, and sexual assault, and ends up winning Tony Awards and a Grammy for Best Musical Theater Album.
Her angst translated perfectly into theater because it was always rooted in deep, dramatic truth.
And today, she's become a massive advocate for trauma healing, spiritual wholeness, and holistic education, specifically unschooling for children.
Right, which focuses on letting children learn through their natural life experiences rather than rigid traditional schooling.
And in 2022, she released an album called The Storm Before the Calm, which is entirely meditation music.
If we look at the entire arc of her life, there is an incredible, profound irony, and I mean actual structural irony this time. Think about the mechanics of her journey. The music industry first tried to silence her authentic voice by forcing her into a manufactured, safe pop princess box in Canada.
Right.
When she broke out of that box, the industry then commodified her raw, survival-driven anger, packaging it into a 33 million selling product. But she ultimately outgrew both of those industry-mandated identities. She walked away from the noise, the expectations, and the labels to find quiet, spiritual wholeness entirely on her own terms.
It is the ultimate victory. She didn't let them keep her as the compliant pop star, and she didn't let them trap her as the perpetually angry rock star. She just became herself.
Beautifully said.
Which leaves us with a thought I want you to mull over as you go about your day. Think about the media we consume today. When an artist gives us their rawest, most agonizing pain in a catchy 3-minute song, do we actually hear what they're saying, or are we just singing along to the hook? Thanks for listening to People Pod. Keep tuning in for more stories worth knowing.